Well, over the weekend, it finally happened. The Vikings extended Kirk Cousins 1 year, $35 million in new money total, and we are going to break down everything about the contract, what it means, and where we go from here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, it happened. The Vikings extended Kirk Cousins for 1 year, $35 million in new money. We will go over the cap implications in a little bit, but first, let me give you my first two reactions. My first reaction was 2 years of Kirk Cousins guaranteed, and I don't mean money guaranteed, even though it is. I mean there is no way out of Kirk Cousins. Don't miss me with the no trade clause. Maybe he'll waive it stuff. Hey, there is a no trade clause in this contract, so there will be no trading Kirk Cousins. Yes, like Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson is probably going to, or whatever, he can waive the no trade clause if he wants, but there's no reason for him to want. I mean, his head coach is somebody he's comfortable with and familiar with. He's in the perfect scheme for him. Kirk Cousins isn't going to want out of Minnesota, so they're not trading him. You can hang your hat that Kirk Cousins will be the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings in the next 2 years because this contract all but meteor guarantees it, like only in the case of a meteor. So there's that. There's no getting out of Kirk Cousins. He is the guy, whether you like it or not. And if you like it, you should be pretty happy about that. There's no world where they accidentally talk themselves into getting competition or whatever. There will be no quarterback competition. There won't be a draft pick at quarterback this year. That wouldn't really make any sense unless you had like a super toolsy guy. We'll talk about that later. Maybe you're drafting a guy next year to be like the heir apparent, and that's a conversation we can kind of have next year. But for now, the quarterback is Kirk Cousins, and that is a guaranteed fact, no matter how you feel about it. My second immediate reaction is, well, this is what Kevin O'Connell told to us. When Kevin O'Connell was first hired and he first did his introductory press conference, his approach to Kirk Cousins was, yeah, I'm really excited to build around him and all that stuff, and we weren't sure if it was just lip service or not. But listen to those quotes again. He wants to quiet the mind of Kirk Cousins. He wants to bring Kirk Cousins into a state of mind where he can truly unlock who he is. And I think I've said this on this show before. I'll say it again. Card carrying Kirk Cousins hater here. If Cousins can fix his brain and the way he approaches the game, and if he can learn to approach the game in get a healthier relationship with risk, maybe is the way I would want to put it, and a healthier relationship with improvisational thought. And I don't mean become run around Aaron Rodgers. I mean, just be able to kind of process things on the fly a little bit faster. If you can get that out of his mind, and it's just a matter of how far his ability can take him, that's a top 5 quarterback. He has always had a fantastic arm, great accuracy. His mechanics are good enough. His actual talent as a pocket passer is up there with the best of them. And it's all about him holding himself back with the way he makes decisions. It's always been my critique of Kirk Cousins. And it's kind of why I've always said, look, fix the cap as much as you want. But if Kirk Cousins cost me 10 cents, I still don't want him to be the quarterback because I don't think he has the Super Bowl winning capability, not because of a lack of any individual talent. His arm's great. And if you put a different quarterback's brain in that body with those mechanics and stuff, I think you would have a truly elite quarterback. But with the situation the Vikings are in now, he has to be an elite quarterback. And he's never been an elite quarterback. He's always been kind of pretty good. And I always balk when people kind of say well, what, do you want Sam Darnold instead? Why are those the only two options? Can't we aim a little bit higher? Can't we do better than pretty good? And that's always been the conversation, right? But for me, the thesis of the Vikings now is that all of Cousins' previous coaches failed to get the most out of him, and Kevin O'Connell can get more out of him than all those people did, which is kind of funny because one of those previous coaches is Kevin O'Connell, back on Jay Gruden's staff and all that. So, look, you got to give him the chance to do it, right? That was the whole pitch, is I can fix him, right? I can be the guy that gets the most out of Kirk Cousins, and I'll give him the chance to do it. I'm not going to sit here and like assume the season is kaput. I'm not going to predict good things for them, but I'm not going to act like I know 100%. I mean, come on. So let's get into the cap real quick. Don't get bogged down too much in the numbers, but the cap is lower than I thought it would be. I honestly thought that if they extended Kirk Cousins, it would be for more than this. But like I kind of explained, it's not really about the numbers for me. It's about the guarantee that Kirk Cousins is the quarterback and that there's no way out from it, even if he plays the worst season in the whole world next year. He's just like Carson Wentz 2020 bad. You can't get out of him. And I don't like losing that much flexibility, especially with a quarterback as good or not quite good as Kirk Cousins, where there are lots of teams with a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, and now you can't be one of them, even if the opportunity comes around. But we'll talk about the cap. So they converted $25 million of his salary into signing bonus, and they tacked on 2 void years on the end. And all you have to know about void years, he will not actually play in Minnesota in those 2 void years, but for salary cap accounting purposes, they count as part of the contract right now. So that $25 million now gets divided amongst those 4 years, so $6.25 million each year, and that's going to be how it works. So they knock, I think, like 14 some-ish million off of the contract in total. They added 5 of new money to it as well, which is what leads to the net 14 something number. So his total cap hit went from 45 million to 31.625 million. And then next year it's 36.625 million with a $12.5 million dead cap charge in 2024. And then he would walk. That is a much smoother transition out of Kirk Cousins, I think, than eating, $45 million right on the chin. But it still is a pretty high cap hit. That's 15 or 16% of the cap this year and next year. In 2021, he cost 17% of the cap. So to put all this in perspective for you, if you took Kirk Cousins' contract last year and you shaved $4 million off of it, that would be about what they did with his contract this year and with the escalation of the cap and stuff. If you shaved $4 million off of Kirk Cousins' contract last year, what impact would that have had on the Vikings? That is essentially the money improvement that we've made vis-a-vis Kirk Cousins. It's kind of the same situation. And now they're going to have to do more stuff to figure out how to get under the cap, how to build a roster and stuff. And now the true moves begin. We'll talk about that too in a second. First things first, though, let me talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It's Built Bar. Built Bar is covered in 100% chocolate, made with the magic and collagen protein, so it actually tastes like a candy bar. This isn't one of those things that's like a bunch of oats lightly seasoned and then you put some chocolate chips in there and call it something edible, but really it just tastes like chocolate chip cardboard. No, this is delicious. They've got even Built Puffs that are like a marshmallowy one, tastes like a marshmallow candy bar covered in chocolate. Like, it's so good. But they don't do it by loading it with sugar. You get like 4 grams of sugar in one of these bad boys, 130 calories in one of these, and they'll actually fill you up. Compare that to like 300 calories and 30 grams of sugar in an actual candy bar. It's magic. It's a miracle. Go to built.com, enter promo code LOCKED15. Whatever you order there, you can get 15% off of that order. So that is built.com, promo code LOCKED15, all one word, for 15% off. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, maybe your first watch of the day. You should also watch the Locked On NFL show on YouTube. You can find me there on Tuesdays talking with Ross Jackson about this or that. We're going to have a jam-packed one this Tuesday, I have a feeling. We also go live on Mondays when we record it Monday nights sometimes, so come check that out. Let's talk about the Vikings salary cap now. So I think they're like $750,000 over the cap after this contract extension with Cousins. So that got them most of the way to the cap, 99.9% of the way there. But they do still have to make one move, and they're not going to make a $1 million quick move to get cap compliant. They're going to do a real one. For me, the easiest one is a Danielle Hunter restructure, and that has to happen by Wednesday. That can save a ton of money, like $13.5 million to do a restructure with that. Or you can do a bona fide extension if you want, but you don't have to. And the nice thing about the Danielle Hunter restructure is it's the kind of restructure he doesn't have to sign off on, and that doesn't change his cash flow or anything. It just changes the way it counts against the salary cap. So you don't have to worry about negotiating with him or doing anything or any sort of dynamic or anything like that. You can just knock $13.5 million off, push it into the future, and we'll deal with it later. That, I think, is a total no-brainer. Also, though, here's the deal. They're gonna shed some veteran guys. My take on this was always like, if you traded Cousins away, you don't have to get rid of any of the Eric Kendrickses or Dalvin Cooks or Michael Pierce or Thielen or whoever. You don't have to get rid of any of those guys. But if you keep Cousins, you're not going to be able to get him on a $10 million deal, right? Even if you shave some off the top, it's still going to be a very large cap hit. And while you theoretically could, and we did it earlier on the show, you could just do only restructures and get all your money that way. It would push a lot of cap down the road, something I'm personally fine with because, again, I think you can always make money and the road never ends. So why not keep pushing things down the road because it's infinite, right? And it's not like there's interest on these loans. But all the reports out of Minnesota are that they want to balance the books, that they want to solve the cap issues once and for all, and they don't necessarily want to be in that world where they're constantly pushing cap down the road. Something I'm perfectly comfortable with. They're not. It's fine. So they're going to shed some contracts, and maybe just one, but they're going to shed money here, and that means they're going to be trading some of your faves. And I'm sorry, it's how it's going to go. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'd be actually pretty happy to be wrong because I don't want it to happen either. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe hold off. If you're thinking about buying a jersey in the next couple weeks, maybe hold off on that. I think a lot of people have put forth the Danielle Hunter thing. What it sounds like, and it is a little bit of me reading the tea leaves and stuff, but mostly I'm going off of information everybody has. But it sounds to me with Danielle Hunter, teams are calling and the Vikings aren't entertaining that much. And I want to kind of take a quick moment to talk about, a lot of people will hear that, but, a team called about Danielle Hunter. They must have, Danielle Hunter has been made available. I think I saw that somewhere. Everybody calls about everybody. And it's one thing if you're shopping and you're calling around and you're saying, Danielle Hunter's available for trade. What would you give me for him? Or we're shopping him. And it's even another thing to say, hey, Danielle Hunter's on the trade block. People come with me to, come with your offers or whatever. It's another thing entirely, and it sounds like this is what's happening with Danielle Hunter. A team will call the Vikings and say, hey, would you take this offer for Danielle Hunter? And the Vikings say no, and that's it. It does not sound like he's the one they're the most excited to trade. And I mean, look, that makes sense, right? The contract is not as bad as it looks on overthecap.com. We've talked about that ad nauseum. And he's an elite player. And if you weren't worried about his injury coming into last year, you shouldn't be worried about the injury that knocked him out in 2021. Those pec injuries heal a lot easier than the neck injury. The neck injury could be a lingering thing. He did play through it. Seems like hopefully it's behind him, but obviously that's the kind of thing that can come back later too. And like, he is an extremely positive asset. And if you are going to try to rebuild a defense, there's like no better player to do that with. So I don't know. Logically, trading Danielle Hunter is asinine to me. And it seems like, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the Vikings agree. It seems more like Kendricks and Thielen are the names that I see popping up a little bit more often. And again, this is all public. I'm not reporting anything. I'm not a sources guy. But it seems like Kendricks and Thielen are the ones that are a little bit more often mentioned as possible tradees. And that's really interesting. When on Friday, I did my kind of, here's my rebuild, the way I would rebuild the Vikings. And I did end up trading Eric Kendricks. I hated doing it, didn't like doing it. But my logic was, in the Fangio defense, the off-ball Mike kind of roving linebacker is very often not a high investment. And I don't really understand why that is yet. I don't have a good enough grasp of it, and I wish I did. I wish I could kind of bring that along, but I don't have the best understanding. It seems like that's a very hard job, and yet it's very often like A.J. Johnson, who is an undrafted free agent. It can be Roquan Smith like it was in the Bears, but with the Chargers or the Rams, who run these defenses now too, it's not as high an investment guy. And I don't understand it, but I guess I'm just kind of deferring that. I guess that's the way that it would happen. But if Kendricks isn't traded, it would be a Roquan Smith kind of role. And I mean, that would be great, right? Of course, you can probably make use of him, but maybe that makes him a little bit more expendable as a piece. And then I think trading away Adam Thielen is a little bit more understandable, right? He's expensive. He's old. They have a little bit more wide receiver depth than they used to. If you really, really believe in Amir Smith-Marset and KJ Osborne, and you can say, okay, there's your trio, and then you get rid of Thielen. Like, you can see that world a little bit. I don't want to get rid of any of those guys, any of those big veterans. I understand it. I get it. That they want to balance the books, and this is a tough decision we have to make. That doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. But something, be it a trade or a restructure or something, has to happen in the next 48 hours before the league year turns over on Wednesday. And we'll talk about that when it all goes down. But for now, I want to transition into Mock Draft Monday. And let's do this. I mean, now we get to do this with the context of knowing that Kirk Cousins is staying in Minnesota. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset everything. All the mock drafts we did previously and players who are off limits and stuff are back on the board. And we're going to do this like legit. So we'll do a 3-round mock draft on the Pro Football Network simulator, no restrictions, and we'll get into it right after we talk about BetOnline. BetOnline is your one-stop shop for all things Grambling. March Madness is on, baby. It starts this week. You can bet on games. You can do bracket challenges and stuff. You can do their player props builder, their live betting apparatus. It's all great. You can bet on whatever you want, however you want. Of course, don't forget pro basketball, hockey, baseball. Of course, don't forget pro basketball, hockey, baseball futures. Baseball free agency is going wild right now that they've finally figured out how to have a season. Whatever you want, even your favorite Vegas casino games. So head on over to betonline.net and get yourself a Grambling. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. All right, are you ready to rumble here? It is Mock Draft Monday. We're doing a mock draft. So I guess quarterbacks are off the table. And I guess let's talk about how the Cousins extension affects this real quick. So taking a quarterback this season would be insane to me because no matter who that quarterback is, it's going to take him 2 years to get on the field. You just guaranteed Kirk Cousins everything for 2 years. And it would be one thing if there were a Jordan Love-esque, super toolsy, off the charts everything kind of guy that maybe needs 2 years that like fits in that puzzle. I don't think that guy is in this draft. There is not a Patrick Mahomes in this draft. There's not a Josh Allen. So we can kind of take that and put it aside and say, all right, the Vikings, they ain't taking a quarterback, except maybe, in the 6th round, then whatever, it's a little different. Or take a 3rd round Kellen Mond type, but they ain't taking a quarterback. So we can then instead look to trying to fix this defense because that is going to, if we want to build around Kirk Cousins, they need a little help on the offensive line, maybe get another passing weapon, hope Irv Smith comes back healthy and all that. That's all one thing. But the defense is in shambles, and I don't want, we don't want to require an MVP level season from Kirk Cousins because your defense gives up 40 a game. We can't do that, right? We can't make it so Kirk Cousins has to be a top 3 quarterback in this league. That's not going to bring you a Super Bowl. And so to rebuild this defense, it is now imperative that you draft a lot of defense and that you hit on them and that they are immediate contributors. You can't do this project thing that Rick Spielman did in 2021. And I think it was a big reason that he ain't coming back. So with that in mind, I'm taking somebody I'm very excited to finally be able to take. He does not fall to the Vikings very often in these. We're taking Sauce, baby. Ahmad Gardner. He is physical. He's got that dog mentality, and I love that in a corner. I love just a fighter, somebody who's a fighter. Not to mention 6'3", 200 pounds. So he's a big guy and he's a dog. And it's just the attitude that it's just the exact kind of guy I want as a corner. I love Sauce, Cincinnati corner. So we are going to snipe him at pick number 12. He never falls this far too. So I'm excited to be able to take him this time. There's a lot of people that could make sense here. A lot of edge rushers, a lot of, you could take Stingley or Andrew Booth or whatever. I kind of had my pick of corners this time. The board very rarely falls that way. So I was very excited to have that. We are doing a 3-round mock draft here. By the way, this now means that for the rest of draft season, I can't take Sauce Gardner in a draft. But I do have a sneaky feeling that I'm not going to have that opportunity very often anyways, so it's all good. So here we are now sitting at pick number 46. In the past, I've taken Drake Jackson here. I've taken Arnold Ebiketie here. I've taken quarterbacks here a lot, but obviously that the dynamic there has changed. But I kind of want to help out that front. So I'm actually going to take somebody that sounds a little weird, but let me explain. I'm going to take Perrion Winfrey. He is a defensive tackle out of Oklahoma, but he has a little bit of that same thing that James Lynch had coming out, where James Lynch played everywhere on the front at Baylor, and it was kind of part of his appeal. And Perrion Winfrey has the same thing at Oklahoma. He's played nose all the way out to 5 technique and all along the defensive line. That's really important in a Fangio scheme that varies its fronts a lot, where you are lining up in a lot of different column shapes of defense, and that means sometimes you need another guy to play just inside the tackle. Sometimes you need another guy to play on the inside and rush from the inside, maybe on a 3rd down when you would take Michael Pierce off or something like that. Or maybe you need an extra guy rushing from the edge. And so having somebody with experience in all of that can kind of end up amassing a bigger snap count than you would think for somebody who maybe wouldn't be listed, quote unquote, as a starter behind Pierce and Tomlinson, assuming one of them doesn't get traded or whatever. And then he's just like a really quick twitch, get off pass rusher, which is my favorite. I love that kind of pass rusher. I always think Sharif Floyd when I think about it. Sheldon Richardson's kind of the poster boy for this. And so give me that style of player. But obviously, young and in the second round. So I'm going to take Perion Winfrey and call that like a big part of the defensive tackle rotation at number 46. And then that will bring us to pick number 77 in the third round. So I'm hoping that with the first 2 picks, I got cornerstone defenders, young ones that can be part of the future of the team that aren't old and expensive and kind of what, you're wondering how many years you got left. Like give me Sauce Gardner, Perion Winfrey, let them be kind of, a guy on the front, a guy on the back end that are cornerstone guys. I am kind of tempted to take Kobe Bryant. Side note, last time I took him in a mock draft, I called him Kobe Johnson. Sorry, I have no idea how that happened. That was awful. Kobe Bryant, I'm kind of tempted to take Daniel Faalele because I'm just in love with how big that guy is. But obviously, that doesn't really fill much of a need. I'm also kind of tempted to go on the offensive side of the ball. There are a couple interesting tight ends around that could be good tight end 2 types behind Irv Smith as Tyler Conklin leaves. I kind of want to think about that. But I'm actually going to continue to rebuild that back end of the defense. I'm going to take a safety here, Leon O'Neal Jr. out of Texas A&M. Very much a box safety type. Somebody who can, fly downhill, really hard hitting, very Cam Chancellor-esque body here. And there are some speed concerns with him. I'm okay with that because I think in a Fangio scheme, you don't need that guy very often to run from one side of the field to the other. Maybe he'll have to play a little man coverage or keep up with a crossing route over the middle of the field or something, but not necessarily be the single high guy that has to range from sideline to sideline, more of a 2 high dude that can come down, be a part of the run fit, be big and physical, and then play a robber zone when he has to. It seems like he can do that, and he'll fall in the draft because of things he can't do that aren't really as relevant to this defense. So I like the fit, I guess is a more cliche way of saying that. So we'll take Leon O'Neal Jr. So I went all defense in this mock draft in my build around Kirk Cousins draft, kind of hoping that whatever cap space they do make, they get offensive linemen with it and they get more veteran presences because the offense is going to need to, with the state of the defense, the Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell offense needs to be elite. This cannot be an offense that just scrapes by. In the Zimmer era, we had the whole, if you could just get 21 points out of the offense, then the defense can carry you home. We don't have that anymore. We need to be scoring 35 a game. And that's just going to be the way it is until that defense can really come find its own. And the arc of a Fangio defense is going to be really, really bad. And then eventually you get enough good players and then it'll kind of suddenly the scheme will start working as intended. But right now it's going to be a really ugly and painful transition from the sort of scraps we're working with now on defense, a few cornerstone players and a lot of Cameron Dantzlers. And kind of transitioning that into a real complete defense. It's going to take some time. You're not going to do that in one off season. And that means the defense is going to be bad in 2022. So the offense needs to figure it out. Kevin O'Connell's promise needs to come through. We'll talk a lot more about this. We'll do Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. So send me your questions at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. Send me an email, Luke Braun, or at Locked On Vikings podcast at gmail.com. There's also a Google form in the show notes if you want. Go check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast too. Get to know a lot more about all of these guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow for Twitter Tuesday. And as always, Skol.